What William and Kate said stunned everyone's silence. Fell over the entire crowd. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone streets of Millbrook, a quiet English village that had never seen such excitement. Word had spread like wildfire through the community that Prince William and Kate would be making an unscheduled visit to their small town. For most residents, this would be their first glimpse of royalty in person. Margaret Thompson, an 82-year-old retired teacher, had been awake since dawn preparing sandwiches and hot tea for her family. She chose the perfect spot along High Street, bringing her folding chair and warmest blanket. The local bakery owner, James Fletcher, had worked through the night creating special commemorative pastries with tiny Union Jack flags. Even the usually reserved bookshop owner, Helen Morrison, had decorated her storefront with colorful bunting. Children from Millbrook Primary School arrived in their finest uniforms, clutching handmade welcome signs covered in glitter and bright drawings. 8-year-old Benjamin Walsh had spent hours creating a detailed picture of the royal family, complete with their beloved corgi. His teacher, Miss Caroline Webb, helped organize the children into neat rows, reminding them about proper etiquette. When meeting important visitors, the excitement was infectious. Neighbors who barely exchanged pleasantries found themselves sharing stories and hot drinks. Camera crews from various news outlets began setting up their equipment, transforming the peaceful village into a hub of media activity. The BBC team positioned their cameras strategically, preparing to broadcast the royal visit live across the nation. Security personnel arrived in unmarked vehicles, conducting thorough sweeps of the area. Police officers in high-visibility jackets managed traffic and helped organize the growing crowd. Despite the serious security measures, the atmosphere remained festive and welcoming. The officers seemed relaxed, sharing jokes with locals as they went about their duties. The village council had worked tirelessly to ensure everything was perfect. The streets gleamed from fresh cleaning, flower boxes overflowed with autumn blooms, and the old war memorial had been polished to perfection. Mayor Robert Jenkins, a cheerful man with kind eyes, rehearsed his welcome speech repeatedly, adjusting his best suit and checking his notes. As the morning progressed, more people arrived. From neighboring towns, some had traveled considerable distances just to witness this historic moment. The small car park filled quickly, forcing visitors to walk from distant parking areas. Local teenagers had set up a drink stand, selling hot chocolate and coffee. To keep the waiting crowds warm, the community center buzzed with activity. Volunteers arranged chairs in perfect rows, polished floors until they sparkled, and positioned fresh flowers throughout the space. The walls displayed photographs showcasing Millbrook's proud history and community achievements. Local veterans, dressed in their finest uniforms with medals gleaming, took places of honor near the front. The village choir had practiced for weeks, preparing special songs for the royal visitors. Their voices had echoed through the community center during countless rehearsals. Today, they would perform for the future king and queen. The children wore their best clothes, faces scrubbed clean, hair neatly combed, excitement practically radiating from their small bodies. Television crews conducted interviews with excited locals, capturing the genuine enthusiasm of the community. Margaret Thompson spoke about the honor of having royalty visit their small village. Benjamin Walsh proudly displayed his drawing to the camera, explaining each carefully drawn family member. James Fletcher described his special royal pastries, while Helen Morrison discussed the commemorative books she hoped to present. The sense of anticipation grew stronger as 11 o'clock approached. People constantly checked their watches, craning their necks to look down the street for any sign of the royal convoy. Children bounced on their toes with excitement, while adults maintained dignified composure despite their obvious enthusiasm. Police motorcycles appeared first, taking positions along the route. This was the signal everyone had been waiting for. The royal convoy would arrive any moment. Parents lifted small children onto their shoulders for better views. Cameras were raised and ready. Collective hush fell over the crowd despite their excitement. This small English village, usually quiet and peaceful, had become the center of national attention. Local people who lived ordinary lives were about to witness something extraordinary. Everything was perfectly prepared, the crowd was positioned, and the royal couple was approaching. What should have been a simple community celebration was about to become something far more significant than anyone could have imagined. The distant rumble of motorcycle engines grew louder as the royal convoy approached the village center. Hearts began beating faster throughout the crowd as people realized their long-awaited moment had finally arrived. Children pressed forward. Against safety barriers while parents held them securely, everyone trying to get the best possible view of the approaching vehicles. The first motorcycle rounded the corner, followed by several police cars with flashing lights and a carefully coordinated procession. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, waving British flags enthusiastically. Mobile phones were raised high above heads as everyone tried to capture this historic moment for their memories and social media accounts. Then came the moment everyone had been anticipating. The sleek black Range Rover with tinted windows rolled slowly around the corner, moving at a dignified pace that allowed the waiting crowd to savor every second. The vehicle looked impressive and official, its polished surface reflecting the autumn sunlight as it approached the designated stopping point in front of the community center. Margaret Thompson clutched her neighbor's hand tightly, tears of excitement forming in her eyes. She had lived through so many decades without ever expecting to witness such a moment in her small village. Benjamin Walsh bounced excitedly in his father's arms. His homemade drawing crumpled in his small fist as he waved frantically at the approaching car. The Range Rover came to a smooth stop exactly where the red carpet had been laid out by the organizing committee. For a brief moment, everything seemed frozen in time. The crowd held its collective breath, cameras focused and ready. As everyone waited for the car doors to open and reveal the royal couple they had traveled so far to see, security personnel took their final positions, trained eyes scanning the crowd one last time before giving the all-clear signal. The driver remained seated, while a protection officer stepped forward to open the passenger door. This was the moment that would be remembered and discussed in the village. For generations to come, Prince William emerged first from the vehicle, and immediately something seemed different from what everyone expected. Those closest to the car noticed that his usual confident stride appeared hesitant, almost uncertain. His famous smile, which had charmed millions around the world, seemed forced and strained, instead of the relaxed, approachable demeanor he was known for. There was a tension in his shoulders that even casual observers could detect. The crowd continued cheering and waving, but some of the more observant spectators began sensing that something was not quite right. William's usual habit of making immediate eye contact with crowds and offering genuine waves seemed absent. Instead, he appeared to be looking through the people rather than at them, as if his mind was somewhere else entirely. Kate stepped out of the vehicle next, and the contrast with her usual public appearances was even more striking. Known for her grace under pressure and natural ability to connect with people, she seemed almost fragile today. Her elegant navy coat was impeccable as always, and her hair was perfectly styled. But there was something in her posture that suggested vulnerability rather than royal confidence. Her hands, usually steady and graceful as she waved to crowds, were visibly trembling as she smoothed down her coat and touched her hair nervously. Those familiar with her public appearances over the years could see that this was not the composed, radiant Duchess they had come to admire. Her breathing appeared shallow and controlled, as if she was concentrating hard on maintaining her composure. The couple stood together beside their vehicle for a moment, and the crowd's cheering reached its peak. British flags waved enthusiastically, children called out greetings. Cameras clicked constantly as everyone tried to capture the perfect photograph. But William and Kate seemed almost disconnected from the celebration happening around them, as if they were present physically, but mentally somewhere else entirely. William reached for Kate's hand, a gesture that might have seemed romantic to casual observers but appeared more like a husband offering support to his wife during a difficult moment. The brief squeeze he gave her fingers was gentle but urgent, the kind of touch that communicates understanding and shared strength in the face of adversity. Mayor Jenkins stepped forward with his practiced welcome speech ready, his face beaming with pride and excitement. He had rehearsed this moment countless times, preparing jokes and local references that he hoped would make the royal couple smile and feel welcomed by their community. But as he approached them, he too began to notice that something seemed unusual. About their demeanor today, the mayor's welcoming words were warm and genuine, expressing the community's honor at hosting such distinguished visitors. He spoke about Millbrook's history, its proud traditions, and how much this royal visit meant to everyone who had gathered to witness it. But as he spoke, he could see that William and Kate were struggling to maintain their usual engaged expressions. Kate's eyes began to glisten with unshed tears, though she fought valiantly to keep them from falling. Her training in royal protocol and years of public appearances had taught her to maintain composure under any circumstances. But today, that training was being tested in ways she had never experienced before. The trembling in her hands became more noticeable as she tried to hold the small bouquet presented by a local child. The village children's choir began singing their carefully rehearsed welcome song, their young voices pure and sweet in the crisp autumn air. Under normal circumstances, this would have been exactly the kind of moment that Kate especially loved. Often kneeling down to chat with children and asking about their schools and interests. Today, however, the innocent joy in their voices seemed to make her emotional state even more fragile. William acknowledged the singing children with a nod and what he hoped passed for a smile, but those who knew him well could see the effort it required. His jaw was clenched tightly, and there was a distant look in his eyes that suggested his thoughts were far from the ceremony taking place around him. The usual warmth and natural connection he made with crowds seemed absent, replaced by something that looked almost like barely controlled anxiety. The walk from the car to the community center entrance was only 50 meters, but it felt like the longest journey William and Kate had ever taken together. Each step seemed to require enormous effort as they moved through the enthusiastic crowd that lined both sides of the red carpet. The cheering voices and waving flags created a tunnel of celebration around them, but both felt isolated within their own private world of worry and concern. Children reached out with flowers and handmade cards, their innocent faces glowing with excitement at seeing real royalty up close. Under normal circumstances, Kate would have stopped to accept every offering, crouching down to chat with the youngsters and asking about their drawings. William would have made jokes and shared laughs with adults, remembering names and making personal connections that would be treasured forever. Today was different. They managed polite smiles and brief waves, but their responses felt mechanical and distant. Kate accepted a small bouquet from 6-year-old Emma Foster, but her hands shook as she took the flowers. William paused to shake hands with a group of local veterans, but those who watched closely could see that his attention was divided, his mind clearly elsewhere. The community center doors opened to reveal the beautifully decorated interior where local dignitaries and special guests waited in respectful lines. Fresh flowers adorned every available surface, and the walls displayed carefully arranged photographs, showcasing the village's proud history and community achievements. Everything had been prepared with meticulous attention to detail, creating an atmosphere of warmth and celebration. Helen Morrison, the bookshop owner, had positioned herself near the entrance with her most treasured first edition books, hoping for a chance to present them personally to the royal couple. She had spent hours selecting titles that would represent the literary heritage of their community. As Kate approached, Helen stepped forward with a nervous smile, but immediately noticed something was wrong. The Duchess's hands were cold and trembling as she accepted the books, and her eyes seemed unfocused, as if she was looking through rather than at the person in front of her. The usual warmth and genuine interest that Kate showed during such interactions was absent, replaced by what seemed like barely controlled emotion. Helen felt a chill of concern as she realized something significant was troubling the normally composed royal. The receiving line moved slowly as William and Kate made their way through the assembled guests. Local council members, business owners, teachers, and community volunteers had all been selected for this honor based on their contributions to the village. Each person had prepared something special to say, a personal story, or community achievement they hoped to share with the royal visitors. Thomas Wright, headmaster of the local primary school, brought along photographs of recent school achievements and a letter written by his students. He had planned to invite William and Kate to visit the school during their next trip to the area. But as he began to speak, he could see that Kate's eyes were filling with tears that she was desperately trying to contain. The village choir, positioned near the memorial plaque that would be unveiled later, began singing a traditional English song they had been practicing for weeks. Their pure young voices filled the decorated hall with beautiful harmonies that should have created a magical moment for everyone present. Instead, the innocent joy in their singing seemed to make Kate's emotional state even more fragile. William noticed his wife's distress and moved closer to her, offering his arm for support. The gesture was subtle but meaningful, the kind of protective instinct that comes naturally between married couples who have weathered many storms together. Those who observed this quiet moment of connection understood they were witnessing something deeply personal and private. The mayor guided them toward the memorial plaque. It's covered with a ceremonial cloth and surrounded by wreaths of poppies and local flowers. This was meant to be the centerpiece of their visit, honoring local veterans who had served their country with distinction. The ceremony had been planned as a celebration of courage, sacrifice, and community spirit. As they approached the memorial area, Kate's composure began to crack more visibly. Her breathing became more labored, and she pressed her lips together, tightly fighting to maintain control. Several people in the front rows noticed her distress and began to whisper quietly among themselves. Wondering what could be causing such obvious emotional turmoil, William positioned himself protectively. Beside his wife, his own struggle with emotion becoming more apparent. His jaw was clenched so tightly that the muscles in his face were clearly visible, and his hands, usually steady and confident, showed slight tremors as he prepared to address the assembled crowd. The man who had given countless speeches and handled hundreds of public appearances with natural ease seemed to be struggling with something far more challenging than royal protocol. The moment had arrived for the formal speeches and memorial unveiling. Everything had been prepared perfectly, from the microphone placement to the ceremonial scissors for cutting the ribbon. The crowd waited expectantly, cameras focused and ready to capture this historic moment for posterity. But as William approached the microphone, something in his demeanor suggested that this ceremony was about to take an unexpected turn. Kate stood beside him, her royal training in public appearances and composure being tested in ways she had never imagined. The woman who had charmed the world with her grace and natural warmth was fighting an internal battle that threatened to overwhelm her completely. The assembled crowd waited in respectful silence. Sensing that something profound was about to happen, William cleared his throat and began to speak. His voice initially strong but carrying an undertone of emotion that those who knew him well could immediately detect. "Thank you all for this wonderful welcome to your beautiful village," he began, his words carefully measured but lacking his usual confident delivery. "Kate and I are deeply honored to be here with you today." He paused, looking out at the sea of expectant faces, then glanced at his wife. Kate's eyes were now openly glistening with tears, and her breathing had become more shallow. The crowd remained silent. But a palpable tension filled the air as people began to sense that something significant was unfolding before them. "We came here today to celebrate with you, to honor your community spirit and the sacrifices of those who served our country," William continued, his voice beginning to waver slightly. "But we must share something with you that weighs heavily on our hearts." The silence in the community center became absolute. Every person present seemed to hold their breath, sensing that they were about to witness something unprecedented. Kate reached for William's hand, and he squeezed it gently, drawing strength from their connection. Recent events have shown us that our roles, our responsibilities, and our understanding of what it means to serve have been challenged in ways we never anticipated, William said, his voice now clearly strained with emotion. "We have learned things about our family, about our history, and about the institution we represent that have shaken us to our core." The crowd remained perfectly still, hanging on every word. Margaret Thompson felt tears forming in her own eyes, though she didn't fully understand why. Benjamin Walsh looked up at his father with confusion, sensing the gravity of the moment but not comprehending its meaning. The television cameras continued recording, capturing every second of this extraordinary revelation. Kate stepped forward slightly, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying clearly through the microphone. "We have always believed in the importance of truth, of honesty, and of serving the people with integrity," she said, her words punctuated by barely controlled emotion. "But we have discovered that the very foundation of what we thought we knew has been built on deception." The silence that followed Kate's words was deafening. Every person in the community center seemed frozen, processing the magnitude of what they were hearing. This was not the ceremonial speech they had expected, not the polite royal pleasantries they had gathered to witness. This was something far more profound and shocking. William took a deep breath, his hand still firmly clasping Kate's, and continued with words that would change everything. 3 days ago, we received documents that revealed the truth about events that occurred decades before we were born, events that have shaped our entire lives and the lives of countless others. We learned that decisions made by previous generations of our family were not the noble acts of service we had always believed them to be. The crowd remained absolutely silent, but the tension in the room was palpable. Local dignitaries exchanged glances, unsure how to respond to this unprecedented moment. The television cameras continued rolling, broadcasting these stunning revelations live to millions of viewers across the nation and around the world. Kate's voice, though still trembling, grew stronger as she spoke. "We discovered that land acquisitions, charitable foundations, and international agreements that we had always been told were examples of royal service were actually motivated by personal gain and political manipulation. Families were displaced, communities were destroyed, and lives were ruined while the public was told these actions were for the greater good." Her words hit the assembled crowd like a physical blow. These were not the kinds of revelations anyone expected to hear from members of the royal family. This was not diplomatic language or carefully crafted political statements. This was raw, honest admission of institutional wrongdoing that went to the very heart of the monarchy itself. William's voice broke slightly as he continued. "We have spent the last 3 days questioning everything we thought we knew about our roles, our purpose, and our right to ask for the trust and respect of the British people. How can we stand before you and ask you to believe in us when we have discovered that so much of what we represented was built on lies?" The emotional weight of his words was overwhelming. Several people in the crowd began to cry openly, moved, not just by the content of the revelation, but by the obvious pain and sincerity of the royal couple's admission. Margaret Thompson reached for her neighbor's hand, feeling as if the world had shifted beneath her feet. Kate stepped closer to the microphone, her voice now steadier but filled with determination. "We cannot continue to represent an institution that has betrayed the trust of the people without acknowledging that betrayal and committing to fundamental change. We cannot ask you to respect us while we hide behind traditions and protocols that have been used to cover up wrongdoing." The implications of her words were staggering. This was not merely an admission of past mistakes. This was a fundamental challenge to the very nature of the monarchy itself. The television commentators would later describe this moment as the most significant royal revelation in modern history. William looked directly at the cameras, knowing that his words were being broadcast around the world. "We are here today to tell you that we will no longer be silent about the truth. We will no longer allow the mistakes of the past to define our future. We are committed to transparency, to accountability, and to earning your trust through our actions, not through our titles." The crowd remained silent, but the quality of that silence had changed. It was no longer the respectful quiet of a ceremonial gathering. It was the stunned silence of people processing information that would change everything they thought they knew about their royal family. Kate's final words carried across the silent room with crystal clarity. "We ask for your patience as we work to make things right. We ask for your understanding as we navigate this difficult path. And we ask for your support as we try to build something better from the ashes of what we have discovered." As the royal couple stepped back from the microphone, the silence continued for several more seconds. Then, slowly, one person began to clap. Margaret Thompson, the 82-year-old retired teacher, rose from her chair and began applauding. Her action sparked others, and soon, the entire community center was filled with the sound of applause. It was not the polite ceremonial applause typically given to royalty. This was something different. This was recognition of courage, of honesty, and of two people who had chosen truth over comfort. The applause continued for several minutes, and when it finally faded, the world had changed forever. The royal couple who had arrived in Millbrook that morning as representatives of an ancient institution left as two people who had chosen to prioritize truth over tradition, honesty over protocol, and the future over the past. Their stunning revelation would be remembered as the moment when the British royal family finally chose to confront its own history and commit to a different kind of future.